Hello, friends. My name is Devin Durant. My father George wrote the following short story years ago. Of all the stories my dad has written, this one is my favorite. The story has a Christmas feel, but the theme applies throughout the year. I can't read the words of the story without choking up. I call this short film No Tracks, The Value of Quiet Service. I hope its message touches your heart as it has mine. Enjoy. Big Sam Edwards had lost his job when the steel plant cut back, and he hadn't been able to find work. A week before Christmas, he phoned his minister and other influential people, gruffly advising each of them, "I can provide Christmas for my own family. If any do-gooders try to leave anything at my door, somebody's going to get hurt." On the night before Christmas, when his wife Catherine and his 2 children were in bed, Sam sat in his small front room with his shotgun across his lap. However, around 2 o'clock in the morning, he fell asleep. When he awakened, he saw a pile of toys, a large ham, a small Christmas tree, and an open Bible. He felt an instant surge of joy. But then he became angry and muttered, "Somebody will pay for poking their nose into my business." Just then, the children came into the room and shouted, "Look, Daddy, see what Santa left us." Sam stepped between the children and the toys. "Don't touch those things. Somebody is going to pay for sneaking in here. I'm not going to put up with it." Sam quickly phoned his longtime friend, Sheriff Walt Durant. "Sheriff, get over here. Somebody broke into my house. I want them arrested." The children gazed longingly at the pile of toys. "You kids get back to bed. Those are not yours," he said. They fixed their yearning eyes on their silent mother, who stood behind them. During the past few discouraging months, if she voiced her thoughts, it always started an argument. The children reluctantly retreated. Catherine went into the kitchen and started cooking some oatmeal. Breakfast would be the day's best meal. Sheriff Walt Durant knocked. "Come in," Sam shouted. The sheriff opened the door and said cheerfully, "Merry Christmas." Sam replied, "Somebody broke in and I want them arrested." "Were you home last night when they did it?" "Yes. I was sitting in that chair. Nobody could have brought all that without making a big racket. I guess I slept right through it." The lawman then invited Sam to follow him outside. As the 2 men walked outside, the sheriff said, "Looky there. Those are my car tracks, but there aren't any other marks in the snow. No tracks of any kind. The snow quit falling last night around 9, and nobody has been in here since then." "Let's go around the house," Sam said. "There will be some tracks out back." Together they circled the house, but all around the snow was as smooth as a calm lake. The sheriff then spoke. "Just be grateful." Sam replied, "Sheriff, I'm not grateful for nothing except the stuff I provide for my own family." As the 2 walked back to the car, the sheriff replied, "I know, Sam, but you'll get work soon. Things will get better." He said goodbye and drove away. Sam returned to the house. Catherine spoke softly. "Sam, what does it matter how it got here? It's here." "Well, I just can't figure out how somebody came here without leaving no tracks," Sam muttered. 4-year-old Katie said, "Daddy, maybe there's some tracks on top of the house." "I don't think so, honey," said Sam. Then it hit him. Some troublemaker had actually rented a helicopter and landed on the roof. Sam propped his wooden ladder against the side of the house, and to the amazement of Catherine and the children, he almost ran to the top. He looked around. "Nothing," he said softly. Katie called up to him, "Are there any reindeer tracks?" Sam paused and looked down at her and her little brother. He winked at Catherine. "Yeah, I think I can see some reindeer tracks over by the chimney." "Well, what are you kids waiting for? Those toys are for you, you know." Soon the ham was cooking in the oven. The children were playing with their toys. The miniature Christmas tree was on the table. Unnoticed by his family, Sam picked up the open Bible. A verse was underlined. He read, "That thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly." Never before or since has more joy been packed into one little house or into one father's heart. During the next 36 years, almost everyone in the small community had been touched by one of Sam's kindnesses. Wherever there was a need, Sam somehow was there. On his 68th birthday, he was honored as the city's most generous citizen. Sheriff Durant was appointed to present him the plaque. Sam awkwardly said, "I don't do no more stuff for others than anybody else around this here town. I just wish I could do like Jesus said in the Bible. I wish I could do something good so nobody would ever know." As the years went by, in almost every talk with Sheriff Durant, Sam would say, "You remember, don't you, Sheriff, that Christmas when there were no tracks nowhere? If I could do something good for someone and leave no tracks, that would be the merriest Christmas of all for me." The sheriff would smile and say, "Maybe someday, Sam." Tomorrow Sam's house would be filled with his children, his grandchildren, and even his 2-week-old great-grandson. It was a family tradition for all the family to come home on Christmas afternoon. But tonight he was alone. His wife had passed away a few years earlier. He would have gone to visit some friends, but his eyesight was such that he could no longer drive, and his arthritis made walking difficult. Early on Christmas Eve, the Gentry family, who had moved into the old Bennett home across the hayfield from Sam, came by to sing Sam a Christmas carol. Their 2 young children, 5-year-old Lexi and 3-year-old Ben, had taken a special liking to Sam. Tears moistened Sam's cheek as first Lexi, and then Ben hugged him and said, "We love you, Grandpa Sam." As the family departed, a heavy snowfall began. Later, preparing for bed, he looked out the window and saw the snow, which had now stopped falling, had covered all the field with whiteness. The winter scene reminded him of that mysterious, trackless night so long ago. As his mind wandered in a multitude of memories, Sam was suddenly jolted back to reality. Looking out across the field toward the Gentry house, he saw an orange glow. To his horror, he realized that their house was on fire. Hurrying, Sam scooped up his jacket on his way to the back door. He quickly climbed the fence that separated his house from the hayfield. His crippling pains were forgotten in his fear for the safety of his friends. A group of people were standing together near the mailbox. The fire truck had just arrived, and the hurrying men were unrolling hoses and exchanging shouted instructions. No one saw Sam approach. Mrs. Gentry was screaming, "Benny is still in there," the boy's father shouted. "I'll try again," but 2 men grabbed him and yelled, "You can't go back in there." Unnoticed by anyone, Sam hurried around the side of the house and entered through the back door. He couldn't see because of the thick smoke, but that didn't matter because he knew the layout of the house since he helped build it. Flames were everywhere. He could feel the heat biting against him. The smoke choked his lungs. Sam heard a faint cough and blindly made his way toward the sound. He found little Benny lying on the floor. He scooped the child up into his arms and, running through the flames, made his way out the back door. He held the boy close to his body and looked heavenward. After coughing violently for several seconds, little Benny began to cry. Sam stood the boy on his feet and told him to go out front to the mailbox to his mother. Sam watched the joyous reunion from a distance. Then he felt the pain as his lungs seemed to be on fire, and his skin felt as though he had been immersed in boiling water. He wanted to be home. Home was where he wanted to die. Sam, as if carried by angels, crossed the snow-covered field, climbed the fence, and staggered into his house. As Mrs. Gentry held him close, Benny repeated over and over, "Sam, Sam, Sam." Overwhelmed with emotion, Benny's parents didn't hear his words, but someone else did. Standing nearby, Sheriff Durant, now too old to be a regular lawman, stood up straight and wondered, "Sam," he whispered to himself as he stepped back to look across the field. There he saw the lights go off in Sam's bedroom window. Just then, the doctor told Mr. and Mrs. Gentry, "Little Ben looks fine, other than his hair is singed a bit." The sheriff tapped the doctor on the shoulder and said, "You rode out on the fire truck. Why don't you let me give you a lift home?" As the 2 pulled out of the Gentry lane, the sheriff said, "Let's just stop in and wish old Sam a Merry Christmas. It will only take a minute." The doctor asked, "He'd be sleeping, wouldn't he?" "No, I don't think so. He tends to keep late hours." As they pulled down Sam's lane, the sheriff said softly, "No tracks, in or out." "What's that?" asked the doctor. "Oh, nothing." Noticeably, the deep new snow on the doorstep was undisturbed. The two men knocked, but there was no response. The sheriff pushed the door open and entered. The doctor said, "Let's go. He's asleep. Let's not wake him." "Sam," shouted the sheriff as he moved further into the house. "Let's look back here," he said as he walked toward the bedroom. A few seconds later, they switched on the light and found Sam lying fully dressed on his bed. He didn't stir as the sheriff said, Sam, are you okay?" At the same time, the doctor took Sam's limp wrist in his hand. There was a faint pulse. He put his hand on Sam's forehead and said, "He's burning up with fever. Feels like he has the flu that's all over town." The sheriff moved closer and said, "I can smell smoke, can't you, Doc?" "Yeah, it must be on our clothes," replied the doctor. The sheriff leaned down. "Sam, did you go to the Gentrys?" "What's wrong with you, Sheriff? I told you he can't walk much, and he's sick. And besides, when we drove in here, I noticed that there wasn't a single track out there in the snow." An almost indistinguishable smile crossed Sam's face, a smile that only someone like the old sheriff could have seen. Then his head fell to the side. Sam Edwards had died. The doctor placed his fingers around Sam's wrist and said, "He's gone. The flu didn't do it on its own. My guess is his old ticker just plain gave out on him." "Maybe too much strain?" the sheriff asked. "No, just too much age," the doctor replied. Later that night, the sheriff had the Gentrys settled in at the local motel. The town mortician had taken Sam's body away. Now the sheriff came back to Sam's house. There was something he felt he had to know. He parked his truck in front of the dark and quiet house. In his heart, he felt certain that in some miraculous way Sam had gone to the burning house. Soon he would know. Were there tracks out back and across the field? Had Sam saved the boy and brought the greatest joy a family could ever know? As the old sheriff made his way toward the back door, his boots crunching in the snow, he felt for a moment he could hear angels singing. He suddenly stopped, paused, and looked up at the stars. He spoke softly as he looked up. "Oh, heck, Sam, I don't need to look out there. You and I both know there ain't no tracks. Besides, I need to be home. It's Christmas." As the sheriff opened his truck door, he looked back at Sam's house. He'd miss his old friend. A tear ran down his cheek, and he felt he heard Sam's voice saying, "I finally did it, Sheriff. Merry Christmas." The next day, there was a rumor in town that the life of a little child had been saved by a miracle, maybe an angel. Sheriff Durant felt satisfied with that.